Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're opening up a really powerful section of Scripture, Matthew chapter 20. It's packed with these, well, distinct but deeply connected teachings about how things work in God's economy. And it's not about effort like we think, but more about radical grace and, well, also servanthood and even the reality of suffering. Okay, let's unpack this. Our goal here is to really dig into the text, using the scripture references, look at the context, the theology, and pull out the practical wisdom from Jesus' words here about grace, status, and what real greatness looks like.
Yeah, and this setting is so important. Matthew 20 happens as Jesus is literally walking towards Jerusalem. This isn't some casual chat, it's the final journey. The disciples are thinking glory, maybe political power. But Jesus, he's preparing them for the cross. So right away, you've got this tension, God's generosity versus the world's rules, and this looming reality of suffering.
Exactly. And Jesus just dives right in by challenging our whole idea of fairness, doesn't he? He uses this story, the parable of the workers in the vineyard. And honestly, it's designed to kind of push our buttons if we believe rewards should always match the work done.
Oh, absolutely. It's a direct hit on human meritocracy. He says the kingdom of heaven is like this landowner hiring people. And it starts off sounding totally normal, completely standard business practice.
Right. Let's look at that first agreement. The landowner goes out, about 6 a.m., really early. And Matthew 20, verse 2, it says, "And after agreeing with the laborers for a denarius for the day, he sent them into his vineyard." Pretty clear contract.
And that denarius, that's key. It wasn't some random amount. It was the standard day's wage. Think of a soldier, a regular laborer. Historical sources back this up. So the agreement was totally fair. Legal, just. They knew what they were getting, a day's work, a day's pay.
Then the landowner does something. Inefficient, you could say. He keeps going back. He's not just worried about getting the harvest in quickly.
Exactly. He's driven by something else. He goes back around the 3rd hour, that's 9 a.m., then the 6th hour, noon, then the 9th hour, 3 p.m., Matthew 20, verse 3. And he went out around the 3rd hour and saw others standing idly in the marketplace. And these aren't lazy guys, they're just waiting, unemployed, hoping for a chance.
And what's really interesting is how the deal changes for these later hires. The first group, they negotiated, got that denarius locked in, but the others, they just trust him.
Yes, that's a huge shift. They basically take him at his word. Matthew 20, verse 4 gives us his promise. You yourselves also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right, I will give to you.
Right.
No haggling, just trust in his character, his integrity. It introduces this idea, doesn't it, that working in the kingdom sometimes means operating on faith, not just contracts.
Then comes the real surprise. The 11th hour workers. It's like 5 p.m. The workday is almost over. Matthew 20, verse 6. It sounds almost sad. About the 11th hour, he went out and found still others standing around and said to them, "Why have you been standing here idle all day?"
And listen to their reason in verse 7. They said to him, "Because no one hired us." He said to them, "You yourselves also go into the vineyard." See? They weren't avoiding work. They were overlooked. Marginalized, maybe? The landowner gives them dignity, a chance to work, even if it's just for an hour.
Okay, so now it's payday. End of the day, wages are due, like Leviticus says. But the landowner does something strategic, almost provocative. He flips the payment order.
This is where it gets really confrontational. The order matters immensely to the point he's making. Verse 8. And when it had become evening, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, "Call the laborers and give to each of them their wages, beginning with the last until the first." Last first.
Wow. So imagine being in that first group, the 6 a.m. guys. You see the 1 hour workers walk up and get a full denarius, a whole day's pay. You must be thinking, yes, we worked all day through the heat. We're going to get way more.
But no. Verse 10 spells out the disappointment. And when those hired first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received 1 denarius. Exactly what was promised, nothing less, but also nothing more. And this fair legal payment suddenly causes this huge uproar.
Because it wasn't about the money they received, was it? It was about the money the others received. Verse 12, you can just hear the grumbling, saying, "These last ones worked only 1 hour, and you made them equal with us, the ones who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." That scorching heat becomes their badge of superior effort.
And now the landowner defends himself, but it's really a defense of grace, isn't it? He speaks right to one of the complainers in verses 13 and 14. And he answered and said to one of them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. You agreed with me for 1 denarius, did you not? Take what is yours and go, for I choose to give to the last one the same as to you." He's basically saying, I kept my end of the bargain. What I do with my money beyond that is my business.
But then verse 15 delivers the real punch. It challenges their whole way of thinking about blessings and envy.
That's the core of it. I am allowed, am I not, for me to do what I choose with what is mine? Or is your eye evil because I am good?
Hmm.
That phrase, evil eye, it wasn't just mild jealousy. In that culture, it meant deep, corrosive envy. Resenting someone else's good fortune simply because they have it.
So the lesson isn't really about fair wages, it's about justice versus generosity. The first workers got justice, their contract fulfilled, but they got angry because the last workers received incredible generosity, which made them equal.
Yeah,
Their sense of deserving more made them resent the landowner's goodness.
exactly. In God's kingdom, gifts aren't tied strictly to merit, but flow from the owner's character, his grace, his goodness. The world says, more work, more pay. The kingdom says, grace can level the field, and everyone who gets the denarius receives it as a gift, regardless of hours worked.
So what's the bottom line here? It brings us straight to that famous line in verse 16. So the last will be first, and the first last. Grace completely flips the script on the hierarchies we build based on our own effort or perceived righteousness.
Right. And the practical takeaway, I think, is tough but necessary. We have to learn to celebrate God's generosity to others, even when it feels undeserved by our standards, even when it makes us equal to people we might look down on. The focus shifts from comparing our work to their reward to just being grateful for the gift we've received.
It's a jarring message, though. This picture of incredible, almost scandalous generosity.
Yeah.
And then, bam, Jesus immediately switches gears to talk about his own upcoming suffering and death. How do those two things fit together?
That transition is deliberate, I think. It's crucial. He's heading to Jerusalem, pulls the 12 aside privately. This isn't a public sermon. Matthew 20, verse 17, emphasizes how serious this is. And while Jesus was going up unto Jerusalem, he took the 12 disciples aside by themselves and said to them on the way, this is need-to-know stuff for the inner circle.
And it's the third time he's warned them about this, right? Each time getting more specific, more graphic, leaving less room for misunderstanding.
Horrifyingly specific. Listen to verse 18. Behold, we are going up into Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death. He names names, essentially. The religious leaders, the insiders, they're the ones who will condemn him.
And then verse 19 gets even more brutal, detailing how it will happen and who will carry it out. And they will deliver him over to the Gentiles to be treated shamefully, flogged, and crucified, and on the third day he will be raised.
It's incredibly precise. Handed over to the Gentiles, the Romans, not just killed, but treated shamefully, flogged, which was a horrific torture in itself, and then crucified. The most degrading public execution imaginable. He's spelling out the violence.
And yet, even with all that horror, betrayal, condemnation, shame, flogging, crucifixion, he tags on the end. And on the third day, he will be raised. The victory is there, but it's almost drowned out by the preceding trauma. And other gospels suggest the disciples just didn't get the resurrection part, did they? They fixated on the suffering.
Yeah, Luke's account confirms they didn't grasp it. The suffering sounded terrifyingly real, immediate. The resurrection, it didn't fit their picture of a conquering Messiah. So they heard the pain, and their immediate reaction was, well, revealing.
It's almost unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
He lays out this plan for his own torture and execution, and the very next thing that happens, someone's asking for a promotion. It shows how deeply ingrained that desire for status is.
It really highlights the massive gap between their worldview and Jesus's. The mother of James and John, the sons of Zebedee, comes up. She kneels. Her sons are with her. It looks respectful, but it's pure political maneuvering.
Matthew 20, verse 21, give us the request. And he said to her, what do you want? She said to him, declare that these two sons of mine will sit, one on the right hand and one on the left, in your kingdom.
I mean, talk about prime positions. Right hand, left hand, that's maximum prestige, ultimate access, shared authority. They're asking for the top cabinet posts in the kingdom they assume he's about to establish. And this, right after he detailed his own humiliation and death.
And Jesus cuts right through it. He sees the ambition, but points out it's rooted in complete ignorance of what following him actually costs.
His response in verse 22 is so powerful. Jesus answered and said, you do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink? And they said to him, we are able.
We are able. Just like that. They have no idea what cup he means, do they? They're probably thinking of a victory toast or something.
Exactly. They miss the symbolism. In the Old Testament, the cup often represents suffering, even God's judgment or wrath. Jesus isn't asking if they can handle general hardship. He's asking if they're prepared to share in the unique, agonizing experience he is about to endure.
And their answer is just, Hubris, born of ambition.
Dearly. They claim they're able, but they're clueless. So Jesus clarifies in verse 23. He said to them, "You will indeed drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and at my left is not mine to grant, but it is to the ones prepared by my Father."
So he confirms they will suffer. And they did, didn't they? James becomes the first apostle martyred. John suffers exile. They drank a cup of hardship, absolutely. But not the cup Jesus meant, not the cup of atonement.
Right. And notice he also sets a boundary. He says assigning those top ranks isn't his role to grant based on requests. It's the Father's sovereign decision. This stops the kingdom from becoming a place where you get ahead by lobbying or pulling strings. The focus has to be faithfulness through suffering, not angling for titles.
But this little request from James and John doesn't go unnoticed by the others. It causes immediate drama within the group.
Oh, yeah. The other 10 hear about this attempt to get the top spots, and they are furious. Verse 24 says they became indignant with the two brothers.
And let's be honest, their indignation probably wasn't about the theological impropriety of the request.
Not likely. It was pure jealousy, fear of missing out. They were upset because James and John might have gotten a step ahead in the race for status. They were all still stuck in that same worldly mindset.
So Jesus gathers them all. He sees the squabbling, the ambition, the jealousy, and he uses it as a crucial teaching moment. He draws a sharp contrast between how the world operates the Gentile or Roman way and how his kingdom works.
Verse 25 lays out the worldly model. But Jesus called them to himself and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them." That's the top-down, power-over model. Domination, self-interest, the rulers are served.
That's the standard model of leadership we still see everywhere today, isn't it?
Pretty much. But Jesus says, absolutely not for you. Verse 26 is the complete reversal. "It will not be so with you, but whoever wishes to be great among you, let him become your servant."
The word there is diakonos, right? Like someone who waits tables, serves others. That's already a big step down from ruler. But then he takes it even further.
He really does. This next part, verse 27, would have been genuinely shocking. "And whoever wishes to be first among you will be your slave." He escalates from diakonos, servant, to doulos, slave, bondservant.
Why that specific word, doulos? What's the significance?
Because a doulos in that world had zero status, zero rights. Their entire existence was legally bound to the will of their master. It was the absolute bottom rung of the social ladder. Jesus is saying, you want to be first, the highest. Then you must willingly embrace the identity and posture of the absolute lowest. It's not just about being helpful. It's about total self-giving, complete submission to the needs of others. It obliterates the world's value system.
So the path to greatness is downwards.
Yeah.
Through radical humility, self-emptying service. And this isn't just a nice theory he's teaching. He roots it in his own identity and mission.
This is where it all comes together. Verse 28 is like the mission statement for Jesus' entire life and ministry. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many.
He didn't come seeking the status James and John wanted. He came embodying the status of a doulos, a slave. And his ultimate act of service, the ultimate expression of that slave-like humility, is giving his life.
And that life given is described as a ransom, a litron. That word implies a price paid to buy someone's freedom, like freeing a slave or prisoner. It's about substitution. He pays the price to liberate others. He didn't just model service. His death was the ultimate service, the ransom required to redeem us.
That's the absolute core of it all, isn't it? Service isn't just being nice. It culminates in sacrifice.
And that's our second big takeaway. Kingdom leadership is upside down. Greatness comes through serving, through taking the lowest place. It forces us to ask, what drives our ambition? Is it the desire to be recognized, to rule over, to climb the ladder? Or is it a commitment to serve like Christ, knowing that taking the doulos position isn't optional, it's the actual path to being first in his kingdom?
Okay, so we've had the disciples' blindness to meaning of grace, their blindness to the cost of discipleship, and now the story shifts immediately to two men who are physically blind. The contrast is stark.
It's brilliant narrative structure. Verse 29 tells us they're leaving Jericho. Remember, Jericho is the last major stop before the ascent to Jerusalem, the final leg of the journey. And as they went out from Jericho, a great crowd followed him.
And these two blind men, sitting by the road, they might lack physical sight, but they seem to have a spiritual insight the disciples are missing. Verse 30. And behold, two blind men were sitting by the road, and when they heard that Jesus was passing by, they began to cry out, saying, "Have mercy upon us, Lord, Son of David."
Son of David. That's huge. That's not just a polite title. It's a messianic title. They're acknowledging him as the promised king, the heir to David's throne. While the disciples are arguing about who sits where, these blind men recognize the king.
And the crowd, the ones supposedly following the Messiah, they try to shut them up. They find their cries inconvenient, maybe embarrassing, verse 31. But the crowd rebuked them that they should remain silent, but they shouted out all the more, saying, "Have mercy upon us, Lord, Son of David."
That persistence is key, isn't it? Despite the opposition, the noise, the social pressure to be quiet, they refuse. They shout even louder. They know this might be their only chance, and they will not be silenced. That's a model for seeking God right there.
And Jesus, he stops. The Son of Man, on his way to die as a ransom, stops for these two marginalized men. He calls them over and asks them a very direct question in verse 32. And Jesus stood still and called them, saying, "What do you want me to do for you?"
Even when the need seems obvious, he often draws out that specific statement of faith, that articulated request, and their answer is simple, focused, in verse 33. And they said to him, "Lord, that our eyes may be opened."
No beating around the bush, just the core need. And Jesus' response isn't procedural, it's deeply personal. Verse 34. And Jesus, being moved with compassion, touched their eyes. Immediately they regained their sight and began to follow him.
That compassion is central. And the result is immediate healing. But look at what happens next. Immediately they regained their sight and began to follow him. Physical sight leads instantly to active discipleship. They join the crowd heading to Jerusalem, now able to see both physically and arguably with a clearer spiritual understanding than some of the original 12. They follow him towards the Passover, towards the cross.
That gives us our third powerful takeaway then. These men model the kind of tenacious faith we need. Keep crying out for mercy, even when the world tells you to be quiet. Be specific about your need. Trust in his compassion.
Exactly. It's about persistence in the face of obstacles, internal and external.
So wrapping up this deep dive into Matthew 20, it really lays out some radical, countercultural truths about the kingdom of heaven.
Definitely. First, we saw the principle of grace over merit. The landowner's generosity just shatters our human calculations of fairness. The reward is fundamentally a gift.
Right. And second, Jesus completely flips the script on leadership with servanthood over status. Real greatness isn't climbing the ladder, it's taking the lowest place, the doulos place, just like the Son of Man did when he came to serve and give his life as a ransom.
And third, the blind men demonstrated spiritual sight. They showed that true recognition of Jesus can come from unexpected places, and that persistent faith leads to healing and immediate discipleship.
We started by noting how jarring it was that the disciples heard these intense predictions of suffering and immediately started jockeying for position. They just couldn't reconcile suffering and sacrifice with their ideas of power and greatness.
Which brings us to a final thought, really a question for you listening. If Jesus says the path to being first is becoming a slave, Matt 20.27, and if we know that he had to drink that cup of suffering, how does that reality shape your definition of success? How does it influence your ambitions, the way you approach service in your own life today? Is your goal ultimately about ruling over or about serving like the Son of Man?
That's definitely something to chew on. A challenging thought to end with from Matthew chapter 20. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.